I haven't exactly made it a secret that Kenpachi Zaraki is my favorite character in Bleach. Like, yes, I obviously love His Majesty King Bargain, and I adore all the hollows, and I love the imperfect creepiness of Mayuri and the horror of Aznat and Tsukishima as family, and I love Ichigo as a protagonist and Aizen as a mind-blowing mastermind, but Kenny, of everyone in Bleach, is the most fun to see when he shows up. Because he's just having so much fun, you know? With him, there's been a simplicity that boils down to a few things, bringing battles, exhilarating moments, and carnage wherever he goes. Kenpachi moves through the story with an energy that's entirely his own. A peculiar monster that doesn't quite feel like anyone else, shouting for someone to come along to show him a good time. He's seemingly simple, maybe deceptively simple, an anomaly in both strength and how one note he seems to be at first glance, compared to so many other extremely fleshed out multidimensional characters in the series. And that simplicity, whether actual or deceptive, works for Kenpachi Zaraki. It's part of his charm. But even a character with such a straightforward drive that has gone through very little obvious development so far, does realizing he should swing a sword with two hands count as development? He has always had something set up for him in the narrative that's been waiting in the wings. A seed that was planted but didn't seem to grow. Not until now. And holy hell was this incredible for a number of reasons, and as always with everything that Kenpachi gets involved in, it got me very, very hyped, so let's talk about it. I read these chapters and watched these 2 episodes, which was more than I expected, but there was no way I was stopping once it got going. I couldn't. I was completely enthralled and immersed, and I wasn't going anywhere. I needed to see it through, the whole bloody affair. I needed to find out how this was going to resolve, and it didn't disappoint. And just to be clear, there were developments with Ichigo and the Royal Palace and things of that nature, but that's going to have to be discussed in a separate video, because the focus of this is solely going to be on Kenpachi and Kenpachi, because I'm way too excited about that part to talk about anything else right now. I just can't. We'll get to all of that in the next video, but for this, we're going down to the depths of the Soul Society, right to the Mukin, and we're not leaving until I've gotten all of this out of my system. Okay? You ready? Because I wasn't. Obviously, Kenpachi Zaraki's defeat at the hands of Yuabaha was very surprising, shocking even, not just that he lost, but how easily he was beaten too. There wasn't an extended struggle. He was pummeled off panel within a matter of a few pages after his obviously hype entrance that I talked about, but what only occurred to me recently was that this wasn't even the real Quincy King that thrashed Kenny so badly. It was still Royd Lloyd as the doppelganger at the time. Putting aside that Royd kind of got revenge for his twin brother that Kenny killed a few minutes earlier, if Kenny can get beaten this badly by Royd, then he never would have stood a chance against the real deal, yeah? It's safe to say Kenny was absolutely crushed by his opponent, which was hard to fathom given how casually he's beaten people in the past. It's a reality check for fans like me that love Kenny and view him as this beautiful, unstoppable juggernaut that he usually is. I'm so used to seeing him effortlessly win, so it's even harder to see him lose so badly. And I can't imagine that kind of loss was easy for him, but knowing Kenpachi, it probably just made him want a rematch, you know? A part of him was probably thrilled to come up against an actual challenge again. I predicted when he lost that this might be the wake-up call he needed to actually try to push himself now, and I was kind of right about that. Where does Kenpachi go from there? It's a fascinating place to leave him in after the invasion, and I was very fulfilled with the direction Kubo chose to take this story. And this is probably a good time to discuss the big revelation, and it was insane. Yet another Bleach twist that smacked me in the face. So let's get into it, because Shunsui is promoted to being the new head captain, which isn't the twist I'm talking about, but was a welcome and somewhat expected development. I think his natural laid-back demeanor will be interesting in his new role. He's definitely gonna be different than Old Man Yama, but yeah, he feels like a natural fit for the story. I feel like of everyone, he makes the most sense, given that he also kind of had a more personal relationship with Yamamoto. But no, this isn't the twist. It's when our new head captain visits the Central 46 and proposes that they try to actually train Kenpachi in swordsmanship that the real big moment happens, as Shunsui announces who will be helping Kenny do this. Captain Unohana, the first Kenpachi. Yeah, here's the moment that I discovered this. Captain Unohana. No. Kubo, what the f? Kubo, what the f? Kubo, what the f? Kubo! The first Kenpachi! Look at her! She barely even looks like herself. Kubo, you're insane, man. This is crazy! What are you doing? Holy sh**. Yeah, I was more than a little shocked, to say the least. I don't know how Kubo consistently keeps shattering my mind with his plot twists, but he does. He keeps doing it over and over. He's got no mercy toward me. I barely recovered from finding out that Masaki was a Quincy, which means Ichigo's a Quincy. Unohana being the first Kenpachi was the kind of twist that I never, ever would have predicted, ever. I didn't see it coming at all. I've been saying for a while now that there have been hints that there's more to her, that Unohana's more powerful than she seems. I think that was noticeable and a feeling that was hard to shake, so I was sort of on the right trail with that. But this? No, I never remotely saw this coming. I wouldn't have guessed in a million years that Unohana was the original bearer of the Kenpachi name. We've known about that name being passed down for a while now, but it never once occurred to me that any of them were still around, standing among us, and definitely not acting as a healer of all things, not someone that spends their day mending wounds instead of inflicting them. Unohana just seemed so far from what Kenpachi is, but that's where this twist was brilliantly hidden, shrouded by Unohana seeming to be the absolute polar opposite of Kenpachi Zaraki. Throughout the series, where Kenny was a killer, Unohana was a healer. Where Kenny was aggressive, Unohana was calm. Where Kenny craved combat and got into a fight every time he came into the story, Unohana had yet to have a single fight at all, and she did have a few chances to get into some. So let's first look back at the Unohana that we've been presented throughout Bleach before getting into the Unohana that was waiting beneath the surface, apparently dormant all this time. I wanted to really go back, look at the hints and possible foreshadowing of this reveal, and there was a lot. Unohana has always been presented as a sweet, caring woman that hasn't done much in the narrative overall besides try to help people. But when going back through her scenes, I tried to take note of how others acted around her, because one of my biggest questions after learning about all of this was wondering how many people know about her past. Are her fellow Soul Reapers aware that she was the first Kenpachi? So I tried to really pay attention to any of her interactions as I went back and reread some of her scenes. And frankly, there are quite a few times when people acted a bit weird around her that I didn't really take much note of before. I think of some comments that were made seemingly in jest that may not have actually been jokes. I think of the lingering glances from people like Shinji when he sees her after 100 years. I think of the fear on some people's faces when they're speaking with her. I do believe that a lot of people know the truth. There's a strange feeling in a lot of her interactions, like the feeling that other characters in her vicinity are walking on eggshells around her. But one of the things in particular I think back on are the times she almost got into fights, but didn't, and the reason that those fights didn't happen. One scene that I think kind of quietly says a lot about her power or hidden reputation is the confrontation with Aizen after he first reveals his treachery. He stabs Momo, and then he easily cuts down Captain Hitsugaya right before Unohana arrives. Now I'll remind you that in this scene, Aizen had just beaten another captain with one blow, like zero effort. He also had no qualms about attacking his old comrades. But he doesn't attack Unohana, even when she's already under his hypnosis, and instead he got the hell out of there as quickly as he could and avoided fighting her entirely. I'm not sure whether he knows that maybe she would have beaten him if they gotten into a straight up fight, or at least maybe maybe she might have delayed him. He did have Gin with him, so maybe the two of them together could have taken her. But if he did know about her being a Kenpachi, and of anyone, I'm sure Aizen did, he apparently didn't want to deal with that. And I think that says a lot about her power. And in the moment, I didn't think too much of it that he was avoiding fighting her, but he really did. You know, he had no problem getting rid of Hitsugaya, but when she confronts him, he just runs pretty much. And even later, Aizen's plan to trap some of the Soul Society's best in Hueco Mundo to keep them out of the way included trapping Unohana too. I thought this was more like, oh, she's the big healer, and the others are like the most dangerous ones. If she's trapped, then it'll be harder for her to help the people that Aizen hurts in Karakura Town. It could also be he didn't want to risk having her join the battle. And then obviously, which I've talked about before, there was Rudborn running away from her too. That stood out a lot in the moment, since we had set up such clear battles in Hueco Mundo, only for Unohana to be the only one to make her enemy avoid the fight entirely. It just really stood out in particular in that section of the story. And now, knowing that she was the first Kenpachi and the kind of person she used to be, it makes her being ordered to stay in the barracks during the invasion much more tragic than anything, because she might have been able to make a big difference. She might have gone out there and given into her old ways, and she would have been one hell of a fighter on the battlefield, much like, you know, Kenny is over there killing 3 Sternritter at once. She could have taken out a few of them maybe, but instead she wasn't given that opportunity and had to wait for the battle to be over and the wounded to be brought to her if anyone was still alive. And we kind of get the hint of how much she hates that she's not able to go help in those moments, and that must have been infuriating to be restrained like that, to know that you're actually one of the strongest Soul Reapers, but you're not being allowed to draw your sword. Between Kubo keeping her out of fights and the little stray looks he would make sure people gave her, he had been seeding this reveal for a very long time, but it was expertly hidden, or I'm just really unobservant and gullible, which is also true, as we know. Like, I could see Unohana probably had hidden strengths, right? I saw that. It's on record. I could tell that there was something more to her, but the Kenpachi connection would have seemed insane if I heard about it beforehand. Yes, Unohana was nothing like Kenpachi Zaraki, but now in retrospect, it was almost to the point of overcompensation. Like, of course she's secretly a Kenpachi, because it would seem impossible for that to be true. Another part of hiding this so well was her physical appearance. Unohana has always had a very distinctive hairstyle that I've literally never seen anyone rock in real life, with that single braid always kept in front of her thing. It was an interesting look, and one that kind of helped with the kind of nurturing appearance perfect for a role as a nurse, and one that contributed to her not looking like a natural fighter to me. And it also hid a very major aspect of her physical appearance, her scar. But when we see her introduced as the first Kenpachi, despite her hair still being braided at this point, she still looks almost like a completely different person. And once her hair's down, that just helps contribute to her looking so different. So I really have to give Kubo credit for how subtle but powerful the change in her expression is, in her facial features. The caring kind of chill presence gives way for this kind of desolate, sadistic gaze. It's the eyes to me that are so haunting, that just seem kind of in constant euphoria, or like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just creepy. It's such a simple thing, but it's crazy how unrecognizable she is when she's like this, at least to me. It completely warps her face to the point that I didn't recognize her in the OG 13 flashbacks that the anime gave us. It wasn't just that her hair was down. No, something so scary comes through her face when she's embracing her old self. I didn't recognize her at all. I sat and then I remembered there were a few people that looked like it could have been her, and sure enough, that was her. I also have to apologize to Unohana though. Once I started to click and I realized who she was in the original 13 captains, she turned out to be the person that I was referring to in both my watch along and also even I think in my analysis video. I was referring to her as Orochimaru. She turned out to be that person. So sorry for that one, but I maintain that there was a resemblance. Okay, there was a resemblance, given the pale, long-haired creepiness going on at the time. Is she obsessed with snakes and acquiring the bodies of people she shouldn't be anywhere near? No. So, sorry, Unohana. You're creepy, but you're not Orochimaru creepy, so my mistake. I feel a little bad for that one. It was pointed out to me by one of my friends that became kind of a joke in the comments. People realized that I was calling Unohana Orochimaru, and I just thought it was this weird original 13 captain looking guy. But yeah, sorry Unohana, my mistake. Speaking of which, my friend reminded me that one of my wife's first reaction videos here on the channel, when she looked at Bleach character designs, she had this to say about Unohana.
Okay, she's kind of giving me the creeps.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What about her?
She seems like, I'm sure she's so sweet and caring.
Yeah.
But she's giving me the creeps.
What
Personally.
Is it the braids? The weird braids?
It's the eyes, I think. She's creeping me out. Just personally. I don't think she's a creepy character.
Sure.
I think she's really sweet. And she's a soul reaper, I assume.
Yeah.
Tender. Motherly.
Okay, yeah.
But like, she's giving me the creeps and I want you to change the picture.
Oh my god, that's pretty serious. Way back then, over a year ago at this point, my wonderful wife could instinctively feel the truth about Unohana when I definitely couldn't. So I'm gonna give her extreme props, and I've been sent comments from that video from all that time ago where people were reacting to her, saying that maybe she's a prophet or that she secretly watched Bleach without me. Yeah, that's hilarious, but she saw it coming. I don't know how. She saw right through Unohana. It's crazy. I've been wondering a lot these past few days about the nature of this shift in Unohana, going back to what she used to be. I considered that maybe this is the real Unohana, and everything we've seen before was nothing but a performance she put on to hide her real nature. But the more I've thought about it, the more I've looked back at these scenes, I don't think that the nurturing woman we knew is a mask. I don't think she's been hiding her true self, but instead she simply changed over time, much like Yamamoto apparently did. We were told that 1,000 years of relative peace fundamentally changed Yamamoto from a barbaric, callous leader to a fierce protector who cared about his subordinates, so it's possible that a time of peace did the same for her, and slowly turned Unohana from this vicious Kenpachi and criminal and murderer to a compassionate healer. Hell, I think this could be one of the main reasons Yamamoto's last command for her was to stay out of the invasion. Thematically, the two of them have turned out to be very similar in a lot of ways. They are former monsters that, from Yuabaha's perspective, lost their fangs. But instead of that, I would say that they were two monsters that found their humanity. Yamamoto knew that if he ever had to become that monster again, he would probably be in a situation that would kill him, and didn't want to have to be that again unless it was absolutely necessary. So maybe he wanted to prevent the same happening to Unohana. He didn't want her to have to go back to her old ways, so tried to keep her from a very familiar situation where she might regress, where she might fall back on what she used to be, become a violent, vicious psychopath again. To me, Unohana becoming this again wasn't like an unmasking moment. It wasn't like, oh, she rips off her face and she's like, this was me the whole time. I was pretending to be a medic. It's a much subtler shift that happens when Shunsui introduces her this way, initially saying her current name before speaking her old one, as we see her expression shift into that unrecognizable face. She probably hasn't been referred to by that name in a very long time. And speaking of that name, her real name is Yashiro Unohana. And that's the same name as Kenpachi's lieutenant, obviously. And going back and looking at the scene where he first met Yashiro in a flashback, she didn't have a name at the time, and he gave her the name of the woman he most admired, which has turned out to be Unohana, which is crazy to think about, considering I would have never connected these two whatsoever until now. So yeah, she had this old name that she stopped using because it didn't fit her anymore, and instead she was called Retsu Unohana throughout the whole series. And even recently, in her reunion with Tenjiro Korinji, he put an emphasis on Retsu, like he was subtly reminding her that it wasn't her name, and he told her that she should be focused on other things besides healing. He knew that she would probably have to start acting like Yashiro Unohana again, because he knew her so well, and he knows what this situation is, and he knows that that's what's going to be required right now, rather than healing. He'll deal with the healing, she needs to deal with who she used to be, and I didn't get the impression that Unohana's been waiting to go back to this. No, this return of her old self is a necessity. The only way to get Kenpachi Zaraki to progress the way they need him to. The woman that she's become, that she is now, wouldn't be able to cut it. Kenny needed who she used to be, the warrior that he admired. He didn't need to be healed in the traditional sense, like Tenjiro throwing him into the hot tub. Kenny needed to be hurt, and to be able to inflict hurt in a way that most people wouldn't have been able to help with. Not to mention the role that Unohana plays in his psyche too. So Shunsui made a good call asking of her specifically to help improve Zaraki. I don't think there's anyone else that would have been able to help Kenny with this. It was perfect. I loved that. Okay, so let's get into this actual confrontation now. It's initially presented as a training exercise where Unohana, who in actuality used to be an extremely accomplished swordsman, was gonna teach Kenny how to properly wield a blade. Throughout the series, we've seen that he's not the most skillful warrior at all, but his brute strength and raw power more than make up for not actually being able to properly wield a sword most of the time. We know that Old Man Yama tried to teach him for a day once, but he didn't learn beyond that. And it turns out the Central 46 didn't want him to be trained or to get stronger, because then he could become a huge threat to them, which is wild to think about. The setting for this quote-unquote training is also fitting, down in the lowest parts of the Soul Society's prison, where they're away from any bystanders. There's an innate feeling down here in the dark of hidden things waiting to be discovered and illuminated, whether it's Unohana showing her old self, or Kenpachi learning about the things within himself that he buried. It was great. I loved this whole environment. There were no distractions. It was just darkness where these two characters could focus on each other and the blood that they were shedding. Their initial conversation was interesting too, as it became immediately clear that there's been this unspoken history between them throughout the series. But the stakes for this meeting are made very clear. It's obvious that only one of them is going to come back. And I love that. That is what I would imagine one Kenpachi sparring with another would be like. With how much they love fighting and bloodshed, of course the only way that ends is with one of them killing the other. It's natural, and it made it crystal clear that this isn't an ordinary training session. It gave the whole thing some extra oomph, knowing that we were saying goodbye to one of these characters. I did really like that Kubo took the time to cut to their respective lieutenants as they realized that their captain is gone. Isane receives a note while Yashiru finds Kenny's eye patch, and that alone shows how serious he is about this. But he doesn't show up with the eye patch at all. He's serious right from the get-go. Both of these characters are close enough to their respective captains to know what them clashing means. They both must know that there's a chance they will never see their superior again, and I thought that was a little sad moment. It's interesting that both of these cutthroat, battle-hungry individuals found real friends in their lives, people that know them well and that were happy to serve beside them. Once the fight between the two Kenpachis gets going, it's fun to finally see Unohana in action. Did I expect more giant manta rays? Of course, but I can get over that. She immediately puts Kenny on the back foot, beating him really, and he's completely at her mercy right away. And we've only ever seen Kenpachi get kind of vulnerable once before, which was after his fight with Ichigo, where he really started to ponder the possibility of learning more about his Zanpakuto, but we still never saw him quite like this. Between him and Byakuya and me, everyone is tearing up lately. But this was such a powerful image because it's so evident how much Kenny cares about this fight and how this opponent isn't like any of the others he's fought. That he really is so deeply invested in his desire to beat this person and doesn't want to die having never surpassed her. It's a humbling moment for sure, because he's right back to where he was as a kid, about to lose to the same woman, like he hasn't grown at all, like every other battle was just him passing time, to lose again in the fight that he cares about most. It's not even that he goes back to what he was as a kid power-wise, because she even says that he's weaker than the last time he fought, and that's the key to all of this. They fought before, and they inflicted scars on one another a long time ago, but it was a fight that neither of them forgot about. One that they had both, in their own ways, been itching to have again. I loved what we saw of their first meeting, which to me felt like an origin for both of them in a way. For Kenpachi, it's the origin of his love for battle, and for Unohana, It seems like it's the origin of her beginning a new phase of her life, moving away from the Kenpachi she used to be once she found someone that she knows would surpass her. I guess I always assumed wrongly that a Kenpachi taking up the mantle meant that the previous Kenpachi was dead. I figured given the reputation of the people that have that name, the only way to really claim it was to be killed by your successor, but that turns out to not be the case. Sure, Zaraki killed the previous one to take the name, but no one killed Unohana, obviously. But yeah, it turns out they fought back when Kenny was a kid, and he was stronger than her back then, despite being just this weird vagabond child who's murdering people by the dozens and climbing on the mound of corpses. So he was just this weird kid, and she was a squad captain, which is crazy to consider. Kenny in this flashback, that wild boy, was stronger than we've ever seen him prior to this training. We've always heard of Kenny being a freak of nature, and I don't think that's ever been more clear than seeing this child on top of a pile of bodies and then overpowering someone with the reputation that Unohana had back then. We saw how powerful those 13 captains were, like cutting through Quincy's. She was this really powerful person, and this kid was stronger. It's nuts. And I love it. The fact that this was the moment when he finally had someone to truly fight, that gave him a fun challenge, and that it was his enjoyment that hampered his growth, that made him unconsciously handicap his own power to prolong the fight. It's a bit of a tragic thing to realize. The chains placed on him come from his own sense of loneliness and a desire to connect with others through combat. We've gotten glimpses of that, of course, throughout the series, but to see the impetus for that was really profound for me. It was a pivotal moment for him, but just as pivotal of a moment for her. Considering everything we've heard about who Unohana used to be, the type of person that went out with her squad looking for fights to get into and for people to kill, Kenny may have been the first person that she ever spared. She had the opportunity to kill him as a child, and she chose to let him live instead. That moment may have been the first moment of mercy she ever had. She could have snuffed him out right then and there, but she recognized what he could become, and that the only reason she was alive was because he lowered his own power down to hers. She inadvertently, by no choice of her own, accidentally kind of contributed to him crippling himself, and she feels some shame for that. She feels shame that she was so weak compared to him that he had to do that for her. Kenny had all of this potential, and then stifled himself for the sake of enjoying fights rather than ending them so quickly. His talk about how he used to view everyone he fought the same way, like killing a person was no different than squashing a bug, was so telling. But fighting Unohana back then changed that. It made him realize how much fun he could have. He talks about before he met her, it used to feel like swinging a sword at someone was no different than swinging a sword around in the dark. He barely noticed his enemy because they were like nothing in front of him. And then fittingly here in the Mugen, the two of them are in the dark, and Kenny is once again finding someone there in the darkness to be able to actually clash swords with. And since then, after she spared him, they've served together, obviously been in the same room together, and it's crazy to me that this whole time they've known that they are both Kenpachis, that they have this really interesting history, and neither of them probably speaks about it with the other. But I would imagine by this point, Kenny is probably let down that the woman he used to admire is practically a pacifist now, and not at all the person he fought when he was a kid. So it was probably really exciting seeing her now when she kind of regresses back to her old self to fight him. Must have been so exciting, like seeing your hero return after so long. And we finally also got to see Unohana's Bankai, and it was kind of left a little unclear to me in the manga about what it does, but it obviously involved blood, and she seemed to heal herself with it, but it wasn't like explained really what exactly was going on. But I think I was kind of close with my Bankai guess for her, especially after seeing it clarified a little in the anime. The fact it involves so much blood kind of made me laugh because that was part of my guess for Kenpachi Zaraki's Bankai, so I was actually kind of close with that video, just the wrong Kenpachi. And for Unohana, I guessed that it would be rapid healing, and she certainly could heal herself quickly. Hell, that turned out to be part of why she became a healer at all, which was wild. She wanted to be able to tend to her own wounds during a fight so she could keep the battle going as long as she could. Visually, this whole part was stunning, with the two of them surrounded by blood in a place where they're most comfortable, bathing in the blood of their enemies and each other. It was gruesome and violent, just like it should be, but I loved that there was so much more beneath all of those red puddles. There's a very trippy section of this where Kenny's skin is melting away as he's fighting, and the same starts happening to Unohana, and I'm still not entirely sure if that literally happened and was an effect of her Bankai, or if this part was just in Kenny's head. I kind of interpreted it as being how he's viewing all of this, losing his reservations and the restrictive flesh that he's restrained himself with. In a way, it's showing him digging down into his core, or viewing himself and his opponent as nothing more than skeletons locked in combat, where identity doesn't matter, where they can kill each other endlessly, where death doesn't matter. All that matters is the battle. But maybe it is her Bankai, maybe it is killing him and ripping away everything and then putting him back together, just like she keeps doing over and over. I'm not sure, but I loved the weirdness of it. I loved seeing him melt away. It's almost euphoric for him in a way, losing himself to this battle, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I could see either interpretation that I could think of, but I loved the visuals. I thought it was really mesmerizing to read and to watch. One of the things that I absolutely love most is that even after reverting back to her old ways, taking up her old sword and letting her hair down, being all creepy and bloodthirsty again, even after all of that, Unohana is a healer. All of this is a treatment, in a way, hurting Kenny to help mend him and help him regain his lost strength. Kenny needed to be pushed. He needed someone strong to unlock the parts of himself that he unconsciously stashed away. Someone that would force him to rise back up to his actual level. This wasn't just simply a training exercise. This was a medical procedure to shock Kenny's system back to being its most natural self, no longer inhibited by his own unconscious blocks. Kenpachi kept getting severely injured by Unohana and then healed, perhaps even dying over and over and over, and that, each time it happened, helped to release more of his power. In a way, it was kind of like how the Saiyans in Dragon Ball get stronger if they recover from near-fatal injuries, but it wasn't so much about unlocking new power, like that is, as it was releasing what's been blocked up, what's really been there the whole time. Every time she cut him down and healed him back up, Kenny would black out, not even understand what was going on, only to feel stronger each time he awoke as she helped him through in her own way. This might sound weird to say, but this was one of the most intimate interactions in the whole series. On the surface, that might seem strange, but it's really how it comes off to me. Like, the connection these two shared was so deep and so powerful. I was really mesmerized by how much joy and fun they were giving each other throughout all of this, throughout something so violent. But this is the place where they are happiest, in the thrall of their bloodletting and their shared bloodlust. It was horrifyingly beautiful in a way. It wasn't romantic per se, but it had the feeling of two people being vulnerable and open with each other, sharing something special, physical, intimate for as long as they could, giving each other the happiness and the openness and the honesty that they needed in a place that only the two of them understood. It was beautiful. I loved every second of it. Like I said, I don't think it was love, but it was something close to lust. It's one of the most unique training sessions I've ever seen, but it was perfect for two Kenpachis. We got to see these two characters so vulnerable, and I loved how poetic it was that they both loved the same thing, but went about trying to get it in different ways. Kenpachi limited himself while Unohana healed herself, both wanting to do that so that they could fight for longer periods of time. But there's also an implication that Unohana learning to heal could also have been for this specific purpose the entire time, that in a way she was waiting for the chance to help Kenny find himself again, to find the power that she originally saw. She knew that this would be the only way, and that she would need to be able to heal him to get through. Hell, probably not intentional on her part, but I left with the feeling that in a way she's been saving herself for this, not staining her sword with anyone else's blood. I don't know how true that actually is, but I think it's a beautiful thought that she became this pacifist healer to prepare herself for the time when she could use her sword to truly heal the boy that she accidentally hurt. I was sad to see her die, and so was Kenny, like big time, but I loved that she acknowledged that she died fulfilling her purpose, healing the man that she inadvertently crippled so long ago. She died for the sake of his physical and spiritual therapy in a way. He was her final patient, and she managed to restore him to his peak condition through a shared passion for violence. Still, it was hard seeing Kenny cry over her, begging her not to die, because like she says, he doesn't want to feel alone again. He doesn't want to feel like there aren't any chances for more challenges. But as she points out, there are still people that could bring him that potential enjoyment. Unohana has turned out to be a fascinating character, one that I had some suspicions about, but the actual answers to my questions blew any of my predictions and thoughts out of the water. It was a fantastic reveal that told us so much about who this woman actually was in her final acts and in her final moments. And because of her help, of what she did for him, Kenpachi Zaraki hears his sword speak to him for the first time. You all know how long I've waited for this, knowing that Kubo set this up so long ago, and we had to keep waiting to see any development for it, but this was the direction that felt right. After his defeat, I knew this would be the best opportunity to really have him explore his own soul finally. I just didn't know it would take two Kenpachis to help him really get there. And it was bloody and beautiful and therapeutic. God, I loved it. That was a lot. This was a long video. I had a lot of notes, but a confrontation like that gave me so much to think about, and I found the whole thing to be really touching while also naturally bringing some Kenpachi hype, as everything he does always does. It's easily one of my favorite confrontations in the series. There were big reveals, interesting dynamics between the opponents, fun action, but most of all, like I said, an intimate, emotional conversation between two people that understood each other better than anyone else. Kenpachi brought Unohana purpose and peace, and Unohana healed Kenpachi's soul. It was beautiful. Can't say enough about it, but I've said so much. And that's where we're going to end here. But I can't wait. I can't wait to see Kenpachi hopefully use a Shikai, and especially I need to see his Bankai. We're one step closer now. I hope that happens. It's been set up so much. But yeah, I'll talk more about the stuff we saw in the Soul King's Palace I'm sure it'll be a bit shorter of a video than this in the next few days, hopefully. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, please join the Patreon, where we also do manga read-alongs every week, as well as react to the anime episodes of the 1000 Year Blood War. Yeah, I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye.